Written in the Australian newspaper tomorrow, you can tell a lot about a government from its first budget, and that's certainly true of what we saw last night from Labor. But similarly, the budget reply from the opposition in their first year out of government, well, that's telling too. What sort of opposition will they be, and what do they keep or drop from the Morrison era? Peter Dutton is the Leader of the Opposition, and he joins me now from Canberra. Mr Dutton, welcome to the program. Let's start with last night's budget.
Thanks, Peta.
Labor's first budget. What did you make of it?
Well, I thought it was a missed opportunity because I think Australian families heard the Prime Minister say before the election that he had a plan to help them with rising cost of living pressures, and I think people were deeply disappointed. I think there's a rising anger against this Prime Minister and government because they thought the budget was an opportunity to lay out the plan of support, and instead there was more pain and less plan last night, and Australian families will really feel that. Not just families, pensioners and small businesses. There are many people who will really be shocked by the increase in electricity prices, gas prices, every other cost of living pressure. And I think last night was really a white flag being raised by a Treasurer with training wheels on that just didn't know how to respond.
Mm. Yeah, I made the point to Andrew Clennell. He said there was a lot missing last night. He made the point that he doesn't think there was a plan. There was a problem outlined, but no plan. To me, it felt like MyEFO brought forward just a budget update, not an outline for a new government where they'll deal with the challenges. We saw today inflation 7.3%, 1990s. You've got to go back that far to see that sort of number. And this revelation that power prices, it's not a 50% increase, it's likely to be 80% in some parts of the country. I know you've been out and about, you've done a tour in, it was the NT in parts of Queensland. How do people cope with this sort of increase?
It's a very good question, Peter, because a lot of families I spoke to, a lot of farmers, a lot of small business owners, a lot of manufacturers who are employing Australians in jobs have already seen a massive increase. Local IGA stores, and there's only so much of that they can pass on. People can't afford an increase in the costs that they're paying for goods or services at those businesses. And I just think a lot of them, as I say, will be shocked by what they saw last night. And the fact that the Treasurer didn't even mention these figures in his speech showed how insincere they were. The big, bear hug at the end, the slap on the back sort of reminded me a bit of Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd. And it was a budget where they were congratulating each other about announcing really bad news for the Australian public. And I think a lot of those businesses and households, as I say, they heard the Prime Minister promise 97 times before the election that they would reduce power prices by $275. People took him at his word. They trusted him. And now it just hasn't been delivered. Quite the opposite, with massive increases and increases that people literally can't budget for.
Look, when he was pushed today at his press club address, the Treasurer pointed to increases in childcare, doing something, he said, about aged care costs as his way to deal with these inflationary pressures. But if you haven't got a kid that's in childcare and you're a pensioner, let's say, you're not in aged care, how do you deal with these price increases?
Well, Peter, I mean, this is why in June of this year we announced a policy which would double the amount of work, essentially, that pensioners and veterans on a pension could perform if they wanted to, if they want to work. So if you're on a fixed income, as you say, if you're a part pensioner, a veteran on a pension, somebody on an annuity in retirement, then you have a cap on the income that you can earn. And there is a disincentive in the system now that people don't work part-time because their pension is reduced. And our proposal, particularly given we've got such a tight labour market, every business across the country, wherever I go, whatever industry, they are screaming out for workers. And if you allow pensioners to work a day or two, if they choose to do so, then that might give them a few $100s a week or a fortnight to help them cope with the cost of living pressures. But under Labor at the moment, there's just disincentive and power price increases, gas price increases, cost of living increases, and there's no solution to it.
Yeah, I'd encourage you, Mr Dutton, to amend Labor's bills as they come through the parliament to put that point out there, because I think getting Labor to vote it down if they don't think pensioners and veterans should work a few more hours a week, there's nothing else for them in the budget. I think that's a good move. Just on childcare, part of the changes, we know that they were announced in the election, of course, but they'll be put through the parliament in legislation now after last night. People with a combined household income of $530,000, so $500,000, are now going to get taxpayer support for childcare. Do they deserve taxpayer support?
Well, to be fair, I just haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it's about 4% of the bill is that part of the higher income bracket. The bulk of the $4.7 billion expenditure in childcare is for people on lower incomes. Look, I think it's difficult, Peter. I mean, it depends on whether you consider childcare to be universal, as the government seems to be heading down the path of, such that you would see kids at school, either in a government or a non-government school, as being a universal program. Is it a work expense? Is it personal in nature? For a woman wanting to return back to the workforce now with 3 kids in childcare, you've probably got to gross about $120,000 before you break even. So it's a difficult decision. So there's a participation element to the discussion as well. But I suppose the general point is that the budget is in
if you've got $500,000, just pay it yourself.
Yeah, well,
you're going to get a childcare place.
Families...
Just pay it yourself.
Yeah, and I think the other point to make here is that the government's spending $4.7 billion. They're not creating one extra childcare place. So they're increasing demand dramatically within the childcare system, and they're going to drive prices up. And in regional communities, they haven't got the places to start with. And a lot of our regional members, who I think really copped it, I think people in regions in this budget would be absolutely beside themselves with anger at this Prime Minister, because on every level, the regions have missed out on any support. The infrastructure payments have gone down, the roads and the dams, etc. It's really, a huge, downside for the regions that create so much wealth for our countries. People who work hard for our country, and people who work hard, farmers, agriculturalists, many people within that sector, mining sector, etc., that drive the Australian economy. And they've been poked in the eye by this Prime Minister in what's a really bad budget.
Yeah, I thought it was sadly ironic last night, that the one thing that's boosting the budget is agriculture, horticulture exports, and obviously minerals and mining. And both are being demonised by the government. There's the methane tax that's headed farmers' way. That's what it will be. You and I both know that. And of course, you've got the constant demonisation of fossil fuels. That's what's helping us pay our way in the world. And there didn't seem to be an attempt last night to deal with the structural deficits in that budget, the stuff that's just going to go up and up and up, like the NDIS and all the money we spend on health. And all of it's worthy, absolutely worthy, but it's not sustainable, framed and shaped the way it is now. So what's going to happen? Are they going to increase taxes here? Or are they going to have a tough conversation with Australians to say, we might have to start taking money off people, otherwise we can't make this add up?
Well, I mean, Peter, as we both know in politics, look at what they do, not what they say they'll do. And Labor, for many generations now, to be honest, have always increased taxes because they've got a spending problem. And that's exactly what they did last night. They raised over $140 billion of extra money in taxes, predominantly from workers as they work more and go progressively through the tax system. They're paying more by way of tax receipts, and the government will always spend more. They talk about this, the spending in this budget, but they're doing it off the base of a COVID year spend as opposed to a normal year spend. So they do have a spending problem, and they will tax more. You'll see in the gross debt figures out to 2026, it goes over $1 trillion. That's because Labor will continue to spend. I remember very well when Tony Abbott came in as Prime Minister, that the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years were a disaster. They racked up debt, all sorts of programs that were baked in where that spending continued, and we were left with having to make the tough decisions to deal with that. And Labor governments for many decades now have demonstrated that they don't have the ability to do that. And what happens in the end? Well, consumers and small businesses, families end up paying the price for it. And we'll see in this government's term, as they continue to tax and continue to spend, confidence will decline and people just won't have an answer They're projecting 150,000 job losses in this budget, but they've got a plan for 20,000 more public servants to be employed in Canberra. That's as Labor a budget
Absolutely
as it gets.
right.
They've got no plan for those 150,000.
And of course, job insecurity at this point where mortgage rates are going up. I think with the inflation figure today, we can almost guarantee next Tuesday on Melbourne Cup Day, there'll be a hike in interest rates again. And this is where the rubber hits the road. I mean, if people haven't got a job, there's no way they can keep their homes. Take me to tomorrow night. This is your chance. This is your first big speech on the Canberra stage as opposition leader. Yes, you'll respond to Labor's budget, but it's your first opportunity now to put your stamp on the coalition, let the electorate get to know you a little bit, get a sense of what you're about after the Morrison years. What can we expect?
Thanks, Peter. No pressure out of that. So, look, it's a big speech. There's no question about that. And for me, it will be about a reassertion of our values. I believe very strongly in the principles and the values of the Liberal Party, of the coalition, our ability to manage the economy well, to make tough decisions that will see us through tough times. I think the Australian public feels terribly let down by Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers. And I want to talk a little bit about our legacy. I want to make sure that I can make it very clear to people what it is that I believe in, what I stand for. It's a first year. We're only 5 or 6 months into opposition, so we're not on the cusp of an election where you would expect a lot more policy detail. But I'll give people a clearer understanding of the influences that I've had, what I believe in, what I think we should fight for, and importantly, the ways in which we want to help people deal with the cost of living pressures and the threats that they're facing now as a result of this budget and the bad decisions that this government is making. When you change a government, you change the country, and I believe that in 2.5 years' time, we can change the country for the better. And I've got 2 decades in this parliament with a lot of experience, and I hope that I can demonstrate some of that in the speech tomorrow night.
You're right to point out we're not on the cusp of an election. I have to tell you, Peter Dutton, even putting values back on the table from a Liberal leader would be a nice welcome change. So good luck with that. We'll watch you closely tomorrow night.
Thank you.